Okay, so I rolled out my leather and then I cut it into strips and then I used this wooden straight edge thing with a razor blade in it to make them really even. I made my own template for how the ends looked because I really wanted it to match the dragon aesthetic vibe that I was going for, and I think it turned out really beautiful. I'm very proud of that. So you'll see in these upcoming clips I'm getting ready to stamp it. First, I covered the back in painter's tape because in order for the leather to take the stamp design, you have to wet it. And a lot of times when you wet the leather and then you're stamping it, it'll stretch out and kind of warp. So this was just a preventative measure to make sure that it didn't do that. The stamp that I used was just off of Amazon. It was one single dragon scale. One single dragon scale. And if I were to do something differently, I might have gotten a cluster stamp so that it looked like a cluster of dragon scales, because I had to interlock every single one of these scales, and I also had to go over all of them at least twice because it was super cold in the garage, so the leather wasn't really taking to the stamp as well as I had wanted. But I do still think that it turned out beautifully. Now this is the guitar strap before it's been lined. This was a really exciting step because I had spent a majority of the time on this step and just making sure that all the scales looked perfect and that you could see all the detail, because again, it was really cold in the garage and the leather was not working with me. So after I was done with all the stamping, I was ready to take off the painter's tape, and as you can see in this clip, it really didn't want, really did not want to come off. So I sat there peeling it off. I was on the phone with my boyfriend because I'm so sneaky. Even though I told him like a billion times, I'm like, I'm working on your project. Anyway. So yeah, I spent a long time peeling off the tape, and I didn't get it all off. There was definitely adhesive left over, but I told myself that it was just gonna act with the glue when I go to glue the lining to the piece. So, you know, it all worked out in the end. So I didn't realize this at the time of making this sketch, but it turns out that my original design didn't match what I was looking to do with an adjustable guitar strap. So I ended up just cutting off the head and the tail from the guitar strap totally when I was still in the beginning stages of making sure this project became a real thing. And I just decided that I was going to turn them into strap locks. So here I scribbled on the back of a copy of the original sketch, and then I'm tracing it onto the leather so that I have the strap locks cut out. I cut out the head and the tail, and then I beveled the edges. That's kind of just something you do in leatherworking. Not really sure what it does, but anyway. Now we're getting on to the pyrography. Basically just burning the out of this. This is to add some dimension and some of the details that weren't originally there when I cut it out, to add some depth and make it look like an actual dragon head. So first, to do this, you dampen the leather again to stop it from charring. I'm not sure that I did this right. I do think I charred it. I also went a little bit haywire. And did I burn all of the edges on this thing to kind of make it a little bit more stiff? Yeah, I did. Totally did. And it turned out really nice. So I'm fine with knowing that I possibly did it wrong. And then I was very careful when I was burning his name onto the smaller portion of the guitar strap. I used the same tracing method as I used to cut out the strap locks, and it ended up looking really beautiful in the end. So I'm really proud of that. And then it was time to work on the lining. In this video, I'm just tracing out my guitar strap and the secondary piece that's going to interlock with the guitar strap onto the lining. And when you actually go to cut this out, you leave a little bit of allowance on all the sides, because when you go to glue the lining to the top piece, a lot of times you go a little haywire. Free me from the word haywire. I never used it before, Why did I start now? Anyway, then I just cut this stuff out. After that, it was time to just glue everything together. You can see there's a ribbon in the center of the top layer of the guitar strap. That's the suede side or the flesh side of the top layer. That's because I wanted to reinforce it. Now, my ribbon, it's a polyester and it's supposed to reinforce the guitar strap because I have developed a fear of my boyfriend's Rickenbacker, and I really just did not want this guitar strap to crumble under its weight. So, hence the ribbon. And I had to cut it down to size, and then it frayed on the end. But because it's a synthetic fiber, you can burn it, and then the sides melt together, and everything's all fine. But then when I burnt the side, one of the sides, it made the ribbon curve weird, so then I had to burn the other side to straighten it out. So it's a little bit wrinkly, but it is straight. So when you're gluing leather, you just put glue on both of the wrong sides of the things that you're gluing together so that the good sides are facing outward, and then you let the glue get tacky, and then you stick them together, and then you rub them down with this fancy wooden tool. And I also tapped the edges with a hammer just to be safe. Now that everything's all glued together and it sat inside overnight to dry, it was time to stitch everything together. So first I took it outside and I punched a bunch of holes in it along the edges. I creased the edge, and then I used this like fork looking tool, and you hammer it in and it creates each individual hole that your thread is going to go through. I don't know where the video of this went. I might have just turned on the camera and forgot to hit record. I really don't know. But trust me, I did it. So this video is just me threading the needle. The thread is covered in beeswax, and I believe that's to make it more durable, but also to make it easier to slip through each of the individually punched holes, I think. So when you're cutting your thread, you want to make sure it's 3 times the length that you would need to go around your project one time. So you do that times 3 plus 24 inches as leeway for the amount that you're using to thread the needle, because you do thread a needle on both ends of the thread. Now this video, I accidentally recorded for 45 minutes straight. I didn't know that it was that much time, but it ended up being that much time. Here I'm just repunching some of the holes with a tool that's a little bit sharper, because the toolkit I got, the forky looking tools, were not the best quality, so I did have to repunch a lot of the holes. That being said, once I repunched the holes, I was breezing through this. I say that, but my first session stitching the guitar strap was 6 hours long, and I only got half of one side done. I spent a lot of hours just on this one part. This part and the stamping were definitely mentally the hardest to get done. And that's because they were very high pressure, and they were also very repetitive, especially with stitching. If you put a needle in wrong, sometimes it would split the thread, and then you'd have to pull out that stitch you just did and then redo it and keep moving forward. And this is when I really was reflecting on the other projects that I do, like with crochet and knit especially. There are times where you have to undo or frog an entire project because it just isn't turning out how you thought it would. So I was really thankful to have some experience with undoing my work under my belt, because I do think that it built up my mental fortitude so that I could do this project. After it was all stitched together, it was time to punch all the holes in it. Okay, so this is the toolkit we used. It's got a bunch of shapes and stuff. We were just using this one for where you weave the one part of the strap through, and this one for where the strap attaches to the peg on the guitar. After that, it was time for some more beveling, and I actually found out at this point that the beveling is to make sure that when you're sanding the leather and getting ready to put the burnishing gum on it and you start to burnish it, to make sure that the leather doesn't start to fold outwards. It just makes sure the corner is all nice and tight in there. And in this clip, I'm sanding. It doesn't look like it, but I am sanding in one direction just to make sure that I'm not agitating the fibers of the leather too much and to make sure that they lay nicely when I do go in to burnish it. Once I was done sanding in one direction, making sure that all of the glue that might have been on the edges was off, or at least to the best of my ability, I went in with some Tokonol. I tried to apply it with a Q-tip, but found that my finger was definitely a lot easier to work with. And after you put this on, you take the wooden burnishing tool, you let it dry for about halfway. I usually just waited like 30 seconds to a minute, and then I went in and you just lightly go over it with the wooden tool, and that basically just compacts all the fibers, glues them down, it seals them in, and it makes the edge look nice and shiny, and it makes it smooth so that there's no raw hide showing at all. I also went in on the edges of the strap locks a little bit, and then I also did the back with the Tokonol, and I rubbed it down with the wooden tool to burnish it because it was raw, and I wanted to make sure it was nice and protected. And then after I was done burnishing the edges of everything, I went in with an old pair of jeans just to take off that last little bit of residue that was stuck on the edges. And now, after all of that, it's time for the final step! Let's go! So, originally, I went over the strap locks with some neat's foot oil, and then I went over it with some tan coat once that had dried. But I really didn't like how dark it made the leather. I think that it took away from a lot of the detail. And this is something that in the future, now I know, get a little bit lighter leather so that you could go in with all the oils and everything. But as I researched, some people just put tan coat. It's just a preference thing. So I went the tan coat route. I didn't use any of the neat's foot oil on any of the strap pieces, just on the strap locks. And overall, it turned out really beautiful. You can see just how much that tan coat brought out all the detail and made it look nice and shiny and hydrated. So yeah. And now that we are done with the actual guitar strap, it's time for the embellishments of the gift, which here I'm starting off by writing a little note. I'm going to put this note in the back of the picture frame, and what's going in this picture frame is actually a copy of the original sketch that I made. I want to keep the original sketch for myself because I like to keep an archive of the things that I've created over the years, but he'll be getting a copy. And then, for posterity's sake, I'm also going to throw a picture of him wearing the guitar strap, a Polaroid picture of him wearing the guitar strap, with that note in the back of the frame. For now, it's just the note, because he doesn't have the present yet, but I'm so excited to give it to him! So, yeah, closed it all up, made it look nice and pretty, and here is the final product.